Welcome to another edition of how to use different Microsoft applications. Within this demonstration, we're going to continue talking about Microsoft Access. We're going to discuss part one of how to create a query. Within this demonstration, we're going to cover the following objectives. First will be to discuss, first of all, what is a query and how a query can be used. We would then look at how to create a query, and I'll walk you through how a query is created within Access. Using the query wizard, you will see how to work with data within a query, how to use the query design view, and how to sort and find data. So let's get started. I am going to be using a simple database that I have here, and within the introduction to Access, I talked about how tables are important and how to create and use tables. Within this demonstration, we're going to be focused all on queries. Anytime you want to create a table, a query, any of those four objects within Access, you will go to your Create tab. This week, we're going to focus on the Create Queries section on the tab of Query Wizard and Query Design. So to create a query, and a query by definition is going to be a way to answer a question about information in your database. A query allows you to select a subset of fields and records from multiple tables. So you can do it with one table, or you can select fields from multiple tables, and then have it within its own single data sheet. So meaning it would be and it will become its own table, but it is a query. So remember, in the first introduction, the first overview of the introduction of Microsoft Access, I discussed that there are four objects. So you will see, as it's located here, tables, and we have reports in here, you would see a bold queries would be here, and whatever query you develop will show up there, as if these two tables are here as well. So let's get started and let's create a query. Now that we know what a query will do, Query Wizard is the best way to create a query is by using the wizard. It's an easy, step-by-step, user-friendly way to specify what data fields you want from these specific tables. So in this case, we know we have two tables within our database. I'm going to just do a simple query wizard, and there are several different other types of queries that are already predefined here for your use. We're just going to, for this demonstration, only use the simple query wizard. So you press OK. Then from there, you get a dialog box, and the first thing you'll see is tables and queries. So you can create a query off of a query. We'll talk about that later. But in this case, if you click your drop down arrow, you'll see that the two tables that I have listed in my database will then appear here. I'm going to start with doctors, and in my doctors tables, I have four data fields. In this case, you can choose whatever data field you want to show up in your new data sheet. Okay, so remember, a query is to answer a specific question. So for this doctor and location, well, maybe I want to know the doctor's names. Okay, I don't necessarily need the doctor code or the doctor location, but the location for each of these doctors, maybe I do want all of the information of the street, the zip, the state, okay, and the city. So I'm going to pull all of those over for my new data sheet. Okay, so I'm merging all of these data fields into one new data sheet. So I'm going to click Next. Then from there, with like tables, you have to specify what do you want to title this query. So I'm going to put that this new query is going to be data doctor information. Okay, so I'm going to just label it as doc info. Okay, and then I'm going to hit finish. So from using the wizard, it automatically creates a new data sheet. Okay, so I'm going to just open up these columns. All right, so remember, just double clicking then will open up all the data within your columns. And now notice we have a new object here of queries, and we have our doc info listed here. So I'm going to go back to my home tab because I'm not creating anything new here. And I want to be able to view my query. Okay, so you'll go home and then view. For view, we have 3 views. The first view is your datasheet view, which is what you see here. The second view is called your SQL view. So SQL is known as Structured Query Language, and this is the language that is used when programming for you as the user to retrieve, to store, to do anything within this Access database. It runs off of some type of language. So think of a programmer, and a programmer has to program an application to do something. Same thing with Access. In this case, it uses SQL language. You wrote this language when you used the wizard to select the data fields from each of those tables. The neat thing about Access, it does it for you, but it gives you the ability to also see what that language looked like. So technically, you can teach yourself some SQL language in the meantime of using Access. So that's one of your views that you always have the ability to see, and you don't have to do anything with it. The main 2 views you'll use will be your datasheet view to see your data and your design view. Your design view is actually what shows what tables you use in addition to what data fields you selected from those tables. So and these are also known as field lists. This is a representation of your 2 tables will be here. It also shows you the relationship between your tables, okay? And so right now it seems like it's a 1-to-1, all right? In the fact that you see there's no infinity sign to show 1-to-many. So that means that one location ID would be here and one location would be here in this table. Remember the fields I selected? I selected the doctor's names. I selected their address of their street, city, state, and zip. The table, so if we go down here, you see this table is basically tracking the information and modifying what you want your new data sheet to show, which is your query. I have my tables listed of where did I get those fields from. Okay, so you see that those are listed. And you always can make changes. So here is where you can select if you want to change and not use the last name, but any of the other fields that's in the doctor's table. You have the ability to do that with the drop down box. You also have the ability for the tables to select a new table and add that. Okay, so that's one way. And anytime you have a check mark, this means that that field is going to show up within your query. If you uncheck that, so if I uncheck the last name of the doctor, anytime you modify your query, you have to hit run on your design ribbon. So if you click run, it's going to modify the original query, and notice that the doctor's last name has now disappeared. If I want that to show again, I'll just go back to design view. I'll check that, and then it will show up. Okay, so that is 101 how to create a query within Access. There are several other things you can do within Access around that query. So I showed you how to use the wizard. You also can create a query yourself by going back to create. You can go to design view query, and this also gives you the ability to create your own query. If I wanted those 2 tables again, I can select those 2 tables. I could even select a query, and notice how the query now is listed. This is the query that I created. If I wanted to select some fields, I can then double click those fields from those tables, and then they will automatically just appear within my field list here. And notice, here are my tables that I selected that from. If I'm done, I can click run, and you all see here is now another query that I created off of the tables and the query that I had created before. Okay. If I go to close this query, this is where it's going to ask me then to create a name. Okay. So I'm just going to put this as a test and click OK. And notice now we have two queries that have now appeared within our query object. Okay. So within each of these, because these queries now are, in addition to a query, they are also a data sheet, and we have the ability to modify as far as working with data within the query. We can, within this, modify and change anything that we want to change, or we can search and find anything we want to search and find. And where we would find that is if we click on that and go to database tools. There are some tools we can still see if there was a relationship. So this is from the first module that we did on the introduction. You can view that. And we also can go back and sort and find information. So if we want to find something within our data sheet, we'll just click the magnifying glass to hit find. And I'm going to just type in a name, okay, just to show this for demonstration. I'm going to type in William, and then I'm going to hit find next. Okay, so it's saying, what do you mean? That is because notice what column I have highlighted, which is the address. So if I wanted to find William, then I'll highlight that column, click find. Then I'm going to put in and type in William, click find next, and then whatever I'm looking for is then going to show up. If I wanted to replace William with a new name, okay, so I'm just going to put in Fred, and I can click replace. Notice Fred now appears. I'm going to close. Okay, so notice this is my doc info. That was Overton. I'm going to now go to my doctors. Okay, and see, do I have a Fred Overton? I don't. So note, a query is a subset of your original data. Okay, so I'm actually going to close these. Okay, you have to close them and make sure they're saved. So now if we go back to doctors, notice Fred now appears. So any change you make once you have created queries, if you make any changes to your data in your queries, it will automatically change in your tables and vice versa. If we go to our table and we now change this state, and I'm going to change this state to Missouri. Okay. After I change it, I'm going to close it. Okay. I'm also going to close this one. And then I'm going to go to my doc info, and notice my state is now Missouri. So vice versa, anything you change within your query, it'll change in your tables. If you change something in your table, whatever query you have already ran, it will change it there as well. Okay. You also can sort data once you have created your query, and that is easy just by clicking or highlighting whatever you want to sort. You can hit ascending, descending, and it will sort it in that order, or descending, depending on what you want. If it's advanced and you want to sort it in a more detailed manner, you can do that as well by clicking the sort. It's going to list all of the names. If you don't want them all, you only want to see one of those specifically, you're looking specifically at something, you can click that and that will show up for you. So this is part one. First of all, creating a query, how to use the query view, how to use the datasheet view within building queries. Stay tuned for part two, more information of how to modify a query.